Friday, November 10th. Today's game, like all away games, began out on the circular driveway at Tangerine Middle. As usual, we gathered around the bus with our cleats slung over our shoulders, waiting for the bus doors to open. What was unusual was the crowd. The people who turned out for our home games, parents, little brothers and sisters, and other locals, had turned out for this game as well. When Betty Bright opened up the bus door and called out, "Count 'em up, Victor!" a caravan of at least 25 cars and trucks, including the green Ford pickup, fell into place behind us. Everyone was quiet, subdued as we rolled out of the parking lot. Nita was back, sitting with Maya, although she didn't look too good. Neither did Chandra, who was sitting right behind them. She had her forehead pressed against the window and her eyes closed. Was she not feeling well? Was she lost in thought? It was hard to tell. As we drove past the packing plant and into downtown Tangerine, Henry D. started to tell me about last year's game with Lake Windsor. It came down to the last game last year, too. That's why they're our arch enemy now. They came here last year with the same record as us, 9-1. They beat us in the last game on our own field. Victor was listening. He called over, "You tell him about that, Henry D." He raised his voice. "Anybody else who doesn't remember needs to hear about this, too. They stole our championship last year on our own field, in our own backyard. They must die for that." I said, "What was the score?" Henry replied, 4-1, but then Victor picked up the story. "Ignazio was last year's captain, Dolly's brother Ignazio. So Ignazio scored a goal in the first half, and we were in control all the way. We must have had 20 shots on goal to their 2. Here he stopped and looked around accusingly. "But in the second half, we let down. We got overconfident. That Gino dude started doing things on his own. He'd get the ball at midfield and take it all the way into the goal. Nobody stopped him. He scored 3 goals in the second half, and that Chinese dude got 1. I figured he was talking about Tommy Acoso. I said, "He's Philippine." "Yeah, whatever. Whatever he is, he took the penalty kick after Ignazio finally flattened that Gino kid's butt." Victor's eyes narrowed as he recalled the moment. It was like a joke to him. I heard him tell that Chinese dude to take the kick because he was tired of scoring. Victor grew silent, reliving last year's game, getting angrier and angrier. We drove on, an old bus and 25 cars and trucks, toward the developments west of town, toward the developments where I live. It was strange, very strange. I was driving past the sites that made up my ride to and from school every day, but today I looked at them through the hostile eyes of a war eagle. Victor had chilled out some, and he started to comment on the scenery. He talked as if he had never been out this way before in his life. "Check it out! It's like lifestyles of the rich and famous out there." Others started to get into it as we caravanned past the villas at Versailles. "Check out that gate, man! What is that?" "That's gold. Look, they got gold on that stuff." "That's beautiful, man. That looks like a movie." They were all sincerely amazed at this stretch of road, this stretch that I took for granted. It was like a movie set anyway, painted on plywood and propped up by 2x4s, as phony as an Eric Fisher football smile. I watched it with them, amazed too. Amazed that it could be out here, where once only citrus trees had been. I watched it all roll by until we pulled into the landscaped campus of Lake Windsor Middle School. I could see crowds of people as soon as we turned around the main building. People were ringing the soccer field. The crowd was 2 to 3 people deep on the home side and spilling over onto the visitors' side. Betty Bright drove the bus onto the grass as the rest of our caravan veered off into the parking spaces. We bumped over the grass until we reached the corner kick area on the visitors' side. That's where we parked. That's where we always park. The coach has made this same off-road trek at every away game, just in case we need to find shelter or make a quick getaway. I looked over the crowd, searching for familiar faces. There were a lot of them. Mum was standing with some other adults along the home sideline. Did she realize that I was a visitor? Joey was near her. So were Kara and Carrie and a bunch of kids from my old classes, from my old life. Mr. Donnelly and the long-haired photographer were set up at midfield. Coach Walski, bald as ever, was out with his players on the field, leading them in calisthenics. They looked bigger than I remembered. Gino, Tommy, and all those 8th grade guys seemed to have grown taller and stockier. They looked like a football team. I pulled on my cleats and tied them tightly. "Listen up," the coach called. "Let me break it down for you. There are 3 things that we can do today: win, lose, or tie. If we win, the county title is ours. If we tie, the county title is ours. If we lose, the county title is theirs." Betty Bright stood up, all the way up to the ceiling of the bus. "Let me tell you something else. You have outscored every team in the history of this county, and you are going to outscore this team today. Okay, Victor, lead 'em out." She threw open the bus door. Victor strode to the front of the bus and jumped out, followed by his boys and then the rest of us. We ran down the inside perimeter of the field. The crowd stared, but no one yelled or spit at us. Mom waved. Joey was busy looking the other way. Carrie was looking right at me. So was Mr. Donnelly, who gave me a big thumbs-up sign. We turned and ran toward the visitors' sideline and heard the loud cheers of our caravan riders. At midfield, Victor turned sharply and sprinted toward the center of the field, as he had done so many times before. Betty Bright was already there. We packed around them and chanted our war cry. "Who are we? War Eagles! Who are we? War Eagles!" The coach's voice rose up angrily, letting us know that our response was not yet good enough. "I said, who are we?" We screamed back, "War Eagles!" and fell into the frenzied chant that began each game. "War! War! War! War!" We broke the circle and the starting players took their positions. I looked around the field. All the people, the Lake Windsor players, the students, the adults, were staring at us with their mouths hanging open. In amazement? In disapproval? In fear? The game began at that moment in silence. I stood in a line with Betty Bright and the smaller substitutes, the kids who only go into the blowout games. I had never minded being a substitute on this team until that moment. Just about everyone I knew could see me standing there, not quite good enough to be out on the field. I hoped Betty Bright understood that this was the school I used to go to. This was the team I used to play on. I checked out the Lake Windsor goaltender. It was the same 8th grader who had named me Mars long ago, those rainy weeks ago. If things had been different, would I have been standing there in his place? Probably. Would I have made any difference? Probably not. They had won 9 games without me, and they had played to 1 scoreless tie. This was a team that did not depend on its goaltender. The action on the field started slowly. Both teams were sloppy, kicking the ball away. Victor seemed more intent on intimidating Gino than he was on getting the ball. Victor and Gino slid for the same ball near our sideline and got tangled up. The referee blew the whistle and called for a drop kick, but Victor still had one more thing to say. He got right up in Gino's face and started jawing. Suddenly, one of those big fullbacks they have, I don't even know his name, ran up and grabbed Victor by the hair. He spun him around and punched him full in the face. Victor went down in a heap, hitting the back of his head on the ground. The referee lunged at the Lake Windsor player and grabbed him. He yelled to Coach Walski, "Out of the game! He's out of the game!" Betty Bright took off toward Victor, and I was right behind her. She reached out and grabbed Tino, who was closing in on the Lake Windsor fullback with murder in his eyes. She pulled him with her to the spot where Victor was lying. His eyes were open, but he had a dazed look. She said, "Victor, can you understand me?" He said to her, I'm okay. I'm ready to go." He was strangely calm, like he didn't know or remember what had just happened. He sat up quickly. "Really, Coach, I'm okay. I'm ready." Betty Bright said, "No, I got to check you out on the sideline for a while." She called to the referee, "Substitution." Then she turned to me. "Paul Fisher, you're in." Victor struggled to his feet. She held on to him while she called the rest of us around her and said, "This is where it happens. This is where losers act like losers and winners act like winners. This is where they send some fool out here to punch you in the face. If you retaliate, you're playing their game. If you get focused on soccer, you're playing your game." She walked Victor off the field and the action resumed. We had a free kick coming from the spot where the foul took place. The referee put the ball down and blew his whistle. The Lake Windsor players, who had huddled together after the goal, were slow getting back into position. I saw this and screamed, "Go!" I kicked the ball as hard as I ever have, over the heads of the surprised defenders. Our front line took off and flew past them. Tino ran the ball down in the left corner, pivoted and crossed it with his right foot. Maya slapped it to a dead stop on the ground as the Lake Windsor fullback skidded past her. Then she powered it into the back of the net. Bang! It happened that fast. That's how it had gone all season. That was our trademark. We struck swiftly, and with just a couple of passes, and bang, into the goal, 1-0. The Lake Windsor team was in confusion. They were yelling, "Offsides!" But it wasn't offsides. They'd been caught flat-footed. Their goaltender didn't have a chance. After that, Gino and Tommy took over. They started picking the ball up at midfield and either dribbling it themselves or passing it to each other. And they started shooting. Gino can drive the ball harder than anyone I have ever seen on a straight line from outside the penalty area. He grazed the top of the crossbar with one that Chandra didn't even get close to. He then made her dive to deflect one away for a corner kick. He and Tommy worked a series of short passes all the way into the penalty line. Tommy reared back to kick it, and Chandra charged out, sliding into him for a block. But Tommy faked the kick, pulled the ball back, and flipped it over her into the open net. 1-1. Chandra got up slowly, holding her stomach. The Lake Windsor players ran out to celebrate with Tommy. I watched Chandra stagger back into the goal. She looked feverish, weak. She held onto the goalpost, bent over, and vomited a white liquid into the grass. I turned and saw Betty Bright hurrying toward her. At the same time, Caesar, our smallest substitute, came running onto the field. Victor had named him Caesar Salad. He only got in the absolute blowouts. He ran right up to me and yelled, "Fisherman, coach says that I'm in for you and you're in for Chandra." He handed me a red goalie's shirt to wear. I pulled the shirt on and ran down to the goal just as the coach was leading Chandra away. I placed my heels on the goal line and looked out. The Lake Windsor players had lined up in the distance, ready to come at us again. I thought, wait, I'm not ready. I was numb. I felt like throwing up too. But there was no time to think about it. Gino took the ball away from Henry D. like he wasn't even there and came sprinting right up the middle of our defense. Dolly tried to slide into him, but he was too quick. He flicked the ball to the right, hurtled over her, and came at me one-on-one. I was flat on my heels when he fired the shot, a bad shot, right at me. I moved my arms to grab it, but they never came together. The ball bounced off my face, knocking my goggles up and knocking me back into the goal net. The ball bounced right back to Gino, who tapped it in. It was 2-1. Gino himself pulled me out of the netting. "You all right, Mars?" "Yeah." "You better get ready, Mars. I'm coming back." Yeah. His teammates mobbed him. Mine didn't even look at me. I took off my goggles and cleaned them. When I pulled them back on, they were smeared with blood. I looked down and saw a dark red spray of blood on the goalie shirt. My nose was bleeding. I bent over, pinched the bridge of my nose, and blew out as much blood as I could. I twisted the shirt around and cleaned my goggles again on the back of it. Dolly called over, "Fisherman, you all right?" I sure was. "Yeah," I yelled. "Let's go." Now I felt it. I was into it now. They came right back at us. Gino ripped a long shot that I dove for and caught in midair. I leapt to my feet and kicked it away. For the rest of the half, I was awesome. I was zoned. I stopped everything they sent my way. I punched shots away. I deflected shots over the goalpost. I came out and slid into them before they could get shots off. The half ended like that, with a relentless Lake Windsor assault that produced nothing. It was still 2-1. We spent the halftime sitting in a semicircle by the far goal, eating our tangerines. Victor would be going back in for the second half. Nita, who was struggling, would not.